The things that I learned, really, I felt a responsibility to pay it forward and to save time for people. So what took me 10 years to learn, I feel like I could give somebody in a much shorter amount of time. All right, so today we're actually pumped to talk about the methodology of our training. So I'm Coach Blue, this is Coach Omar. I've been running for most of my life, but I was not a collegiate or a high school athlete. I was really more into other sports, and in my 20s I was more a surf bum. Got into marathoning when I was 26. I'm now 39, and it's been sort of a pursuit of how fast I could get in that process for me. Along the way, I had some really amazing coaches that changed my world, and so I became a coach reluctantly because I always thought of myself as an athlete and didn't ever want to be a coach. But the things that I learned, really, I felt a responsibility to pay it forward and to save time for people. So what took me 10 years to learn, I feel like I could give somebody in a much shorter amount of time. So that's what led to me becoming a coach. Founded a couple different races, Malibu Marathon, the Speed Project. I love the sport of running and for so many different reasons. Been coaching with Nike for 6 years. And the lab we started, I think, 2 years ago. So lots of stuff running. I've run 64 marathons myself. My PR right now is 2:23, hopefully improving on that. That never stops. Hopefully if I get down to 2:19, I'll try to improve on that. Like whatever it is, like all of us, trying to improve. Omar, I'll let him tell his story, but we brought him in this past year. And we're super excited to have him as well on the coaching side. So,
unlike Blue, I did start running in high school. Competed pretty competitively through college, post-collegiately. Always been intrigued with methodology and felt like everything that had to do with that. I've had amazing coaches that I've shared the same coaching philosophy with, and I've learned and grew from them. I always thought in the back of my head that I'll be coaching at some point. It was just a passion I've always had, even right now when I compete or train. Always writing new ideas, always trying to learn more about the sport. I'd say I'm a student of the sport as well as a coach, and about 6 months ago started coaching with Blue. Luckily we share the same philosophy, and we're trying to share that with everybody.
we have to bring up Renato Canovo because, in my opinion, he's the best distance coach in the world and in the history of the sport of running. If you don't know the name Renato Canovo, write it down. He's very good about putting out everything that he thinks that he knows to the world. So he comments a lot on Let's Run. He's got a lot of PowerPoint presentations that you can check out. He basically has coached the highest number of medalists in the Olympics and World Championships of any coach in the history of running. So I think it's like 45 Olympic gold medalists.
And that's
from 800 meters,
800 meters
all the way to the marathon. So what we've learned is it applies to not only us, to every different person that we coach. The methods themselves are sound, and that if we can apply them and adjust them to your workload capacity, then it has the same effect. I think the most important thing is phases. We have to understand what we're trying to do within a certain phase of training through a cycle. So we have a macro cycle, which could be the year or it could be the season. And then we have the ultimate goal of being at your peak during your peak race, right? So that's the ultimate goal. But we have to arrive there through these phases that each have their own purpose.
Intro, getting back into running, before it starts getting very specific, usually about two or 3 weeks. then you go into the fundamental phase, which is the most important phase. Is where you build your global volume in training, your mileage. You focus on different areas that you don't necessarily focus on in a specific phase later on.
Fundamental is sort of where we build our strength. It's the least specific thing we do because we're furthest out from the race. So we can do a lot more strength training, a lot of hills, hill repeats, sprints. It's a lot of power and structural building. So we're trying to make you the most powerful general athlete that you can be. So when we start throwing this heavy volume at you later on, that your body is the athlete that can handle that.
Special phase, which is a transitional phase from that fundamental block going into specific training.
The last two phases, which are the sharpening phases, special and specific, that's when we start to whittle away or sharpen the knife. You know, that's when like we take whatever we were able to build in that base phase, in that fundamental phase, now we can like take that into race specific phases, and you can get away with more for your race with that athlete in those two phases. So most people don't do a long enough base phase, and they rush into the specific phases, and they just don't have as much to work with. Like you said, the fundamental phase is the longest and biggest phase. We're trying to create an aerobic volume that is the great, well, especially in a marathoner, because a marathon is an aerobic game that we're playing. But the aerobic volume is the largest volume of all of the training stimulus for any athlete. It's the largest amount of.
Just a general idea of like if someone's just getting into the marathon or they haven't run yet, like how big of a block you're talking about.
Yeah.
So what's your 16-week, 20-week?
It's a great question. Yeah, because I think that the 16-week is such a common, that's like the basic, like everybody's like 16-week training plan, or 16 to 20 weeks is sort of common. Ideally, we would have 5 months to work with an athlete, especially in the beginning. I mean,
But it totally depends on where the athlete
they
is
are.
starting from.
yeah,
So if, let's just say they're starting from scratch, they're going to need a lot more time.
we could have a best case scenario. It would be about 5 to 6 months for any athlete.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, if you look at the elites, they're doing like 1 to 2 a year by design. So they got 2 opportunities in the marathon per year where they can really go after it.
Well, that also works in shorter distances. They'll have a 2-peak year where they
Yeah,
peak.
2 peaks in the whole year.
They
Yeah.
peak in indoor and then they peak later on. Special phase is where like let's just say for a marathon, the long run, you're not quite at 100%, but you're breaking up that long run to start getting closer to a specific phase. So we'll be working with like 93 to 97%, not quite at 100%, but it's broken up. So let's just, for example, you break up a 30K long run into 5K blocks, or 4K with 1K recoveries. It's teaching the body to run closer to marathon pace, recovering for a short period of time while keeping the heart rate up, and then it's pretty much a transitional phase, transitional work.
But I think we have to back up, because I think percentages wise, we have to like tell them why we're. So like if you look at percentage, when we talk about percentages for a marathoner, the goal is to run 100% of your goal marathon pace in your race, right? So everything we discuss is percentages. We can identify back if it's truly your body's potential, and we can use different things from heart rate to a time trial at a certain distance. We can use that to identify what potential your body has for a certain pace for the race, right? So let's say you run a fast 5K, and we're like, okay, your goal now is going to be 2:30 for the marathon. That's now going to be your 100% goal race pace. We might adjust that through the cycle if things aren't working the right way, but then everything, all of our percentages and all of our workouts are all derived from that 100%. So if we look at the fundamental phase and we're getting up to that high volume, we're never going above, we'll never even go to 90% of your goal marathon pace for a long run. But, and the reason we're not doing that is because if it's truly your potential, the 90% mark puts us below your anaerobic threshold. When we go above the anaerobic threshold, we're now burning sugar and glycogen as our main source of fuel as opposed to fats. Different physiological system than we want to be in when we're at goal marathon pace. So when we're running our marathon, when Kipchoge runs a marathon at 4:37 per mile, he's actually aerobic. And it's a very important thing to identify, because if you're anaerobic, you can't run hard for 20 miles and then bump it up in the last 10K. Watch every elite run the marathon, they always hammer the last 10K. They only do it because they're running aerobically for the first 20. You go anaerobic early, that's not happening. So in the fundamental phase, we're building, maybe in the beginning of the phase, we start from 80 to 85% of your marathon pace. It's going to be very aerobic. You're going to be singing songs, you're going to be having conversations, you're going to be talking all the way through your long run. And as we, week to week, go up to this cycle, we're bumping up the pace from week to week between long intervals and long steady runs. We're always bumping up the pace just slightly. So like 85% becomes 87%, 87, 88, 89, and we're just bumping that up. What's happening? The heart rate is staying the same. You're getting fitter. So you're getting fitter, you're getting faster, heart rate staying the same, you're below your anaerobic threshold, now you're a faster athlete. 2 months later, you look back, all of a sudden you're an athlete started at 6:05 per mile, they're now running 5:35 per mile, it's at the same heart rate. If we don't achieve that in the base phase, in the fundamental phase, then we're not doing our jobs.
Yeah.
So the reason we only program 4 weeks at a time, because if we're not achieving each one of these things as we go, there's no point in training. Like go download the 16-week training plan, good luck, you know? Like that's going to be just as good for you if we're not paying attention to these details. That's why we are here as coaches. So by the end of the fundamental phase, what we identify is that we've now graduated the athlete to go beyond the 90%. You've gotten to the 90%, you're still aerobic, you're good to go. We're going to go into a 5-week phase where we go between 90 and 95% for these long runs. And so now it's like, okay, it's getting real. And it's going to be playing with the threshold now. We're going to be tipping into that threshold territory, and we're sort of trying to just get a little, we're pushing on the body's ability to stay aerobic, even though we're like almost crossing over. 5 weeks of that, the fitness again is adapting to it, but you're taxing the body on a level where you can't maintain it for as long. So we can't spend a lot of time there. So 5 weeks is what we're sort of identifying as, okay, we're pushing the body, and we've got another probably 5 weeks after that. Our special and our specific phase together is 10 weeks, because we've seen in the history of all runners, about 10 weeks, once you cross into that territory, is about all you can handle.
Yeah.
So we split it in half. The special phase, 5 weeks, specific phase, 5 weeks. Specific is exactly what it sounds like. Between 95 and 100% of race pace, a lot of workouts that are right around your race pace at crazy long distances. So 5 times 5K at 100% marathon pace, it's like a 20-mile run, and you're mostly doing it at race pace. A lot of people will never even think about doing that. We do a lot of it. And in the last 5 weeks, that's almost all we do.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's, those of you who have experienced it, it's like you get there and you're like, okay, I can't do this forever. You know, this is like, the race better be coming soon. But then all of a sudden you get in the race and, you know, your body is, you've done everything in your training besides run 26 miles at 100%. Taper, obviously the taper is something that,
It's
relative to the athlete. It's an imperfect science as well. It was first discovered by athletes, world championship, Olympic athletes getting sick before a goal race. And it happened enough times to where they're like, how come world records keep getting set after these athletes have been sick? Like, what's the common denominator? Well, what have they been doing? They've been not running for a week or two, you know, and that was sort of the first. And actually, Timothy Noakes, who wrote The Lore of Running, has a full sort of history of that. If you ever want to look that up, that's a great book. Timothy Noakes from South Africa. He has a 4th edition of this book. It's like this thick. It's an encyclopedia. But he's taken all of the scientific studies done on the sport of running, and he's basically put them into one book, and then he cites the study. So it's a really cool scientific collection of our sport. The workouts, we kind of touched on the workouts. I think the one thing that we didn't talk about is the speed workouts and how speed fits into this idea of building the aerobic percentage as you go. So I'm going to give this to Omar and talk about, okay, well, if we do that, that sounds like everything. Why would we ever even do speed? But on the other end of this spectrum is speed. And I want to tell them how we have this sort of pyramid effect.
Okay,
how that works.
When we touch on what we call speed work, which is mechanical speed or workouts that are for aerobic power, like intervals, whether it's 300s up to 1Ks, most of that is much faster than marathon pace. It would be closer to 110 to 115% of the marathon pace. So what these workouts do is that they teach the body to run faster than the marathon pace. So when it comes to focusing on running marathon pace, it makes it much easier. When you're doing this type of work early in training, what it does is your body gets callous to running more efficiently. So that's the main reason for it.
Yeah, you're more efficient at greater speeds, you're more powerful, your power output's more higher, and you also have the ability to push up your anaerobic threshold. So by doing more of those really fast, hard workouts, your anaerobic threshold goes up. So if we're trying to stay below the threshold for our long runs, but now our threshold's a little bit higher, that's just more we can squeeze out of our ultimate pace for the marathon. Some questions. Any questions?
So understanding your base and where you should start, it's always been super difficult for me.
Yeah.
Like, sure, I want to run the marathon in 3 hours, but
Yeah.
I did it in 4:20.
Yeah.
So it's understanding what type of workouts you need to do to actually get it where I can start speaking to percentages.
Yeah.
That's what's I don't know how to get there.
So, where have you been at with volume? Like, do you just kind of run on how much you feel like you can handle?
Pretty much.
Do you ever break? Do you
we
eventually break
we
down?
completely winged it from
Yeah.
Jan 1 to
That's
the
what,
marathon.
that's what we do before you. That's what you got to do. Yeah.
And it was a blast.
That's where it starts. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So you're starting in the perfect place, basically. Yeah. So how far did you get?
A week? We were probably doing about 25 to 30 miles a week near the end.
So that to me is just like pure potential when I hear that. I'm like, oh damn. You run a marathon, you're running 25 miles, 30 miles a week. That's like the sky's the limit for you. I mean, because you haven't even touched on, like if you think about your race distance was essentially what your week workload was at the peak of your training. So like that's awesome, because next time you go about training, the more you can start to increase your workload capacity throughout the week, the less percentage your long run is of your total week. So it's going to feel easier and easier and easier the greater you grow your volume relative to your race distance. So it's sort of like there's no perfect place for that, but it's like the sky is the limit right now for you guys. Like, as you want to stay healthy, so it has to be like. It's time too, It's like how much time you have, like what.
But is it so? Like, do we go to the track and do like, 2 400s and an 800 and a mile and start to build all these percentages up?
Yeah.
So I'm a cyclist, but we have a
Yeah.
power meter on the bike.
Right.
So you always.
Yeah.
Everything's data driven, right?
Yeah.
Where this, it's like there's no power
Well,
meter on your leg.
Yeah, but with the speed workouts, you can start at a workload volume for your speed workout. If you're going to do one really heavy speed workout a week, start with like 10 Ks worth of workload. So you could break that into, 10 by 1K or 20 times 500, but the whole workload of the workout, because you can play with it 100 different ways. You can break it apart however you want, but know what the workload is. And as you go through your cycle, start to build on the amount of workload within the speed run. And because you're ultimately training for a marathon, it doesn't have to keep getting faster as you extend out the volume of it. So it was a 10K worth of workload becomes 15K in a couple months, and ultimately 20Ks worth of workload. It doesn't mean it has to be at that same beginning pace. It can actually be a little bit less pace because you have to do it for longer. And that's that funnel effect we were talking about. So you're doing more of it, but it's a little bit easier.
Okay.
Still gonna kick your ass, but.
We probably peaked early too.
What's that?
We did our biggest distance, I think, way too soon, and then we had too much time between starting the race.
But was that the speed run or is that the long run?
We didn't look at the map right. We ran a marathon by accident.
But we do that too, though. We do that. We start out marathon distance right away. Like if the athletes are ready for it. But we go into let's say 25 miles or 35 to 40 Ks worth of workload for the long runs. We start at that and we stay at that because we're trying to get better at that distance. Right. And a lot of people look at our plans like, why are you running a marathon and it's like 4 months away? It's because the percentage that we're running it at is very easy, and it's allowing us to build the percentages in a healthy way that's going to keep us aerobic through that whole cycle. And I think that's what people don't see when they see our workouts. All they see is a pace and a distance. Time trials are great. Like go run a 5K time trial. And that'll give you like probably 110 to 112% of your goal marathon pace.
Okay.
That's good. Yeah.
How do you start getting an athlete to shift from thinking about their own fatigue to starting to think about proactively the percentages of effort? Because I can imagine, like when I first started running, it was like, I'm just trying to hold on. Like, I'm just like, this hurts, I'm in pain, I'm really tired, I just want to get one more step. This seems like a really big mental shift of like, okay, I'm making myself more tired, and then I'm going to make myself less tired. How do you train the brain?
I think it's like sort of chicken or the egg thing, but I think it's like if you have somebody do a 5K time trial and then you communicate, look, this is 112% of your goal marathon pace now. And then they look at the pace and they're like, there's no way in hell I'm running a marathon that fast, because it sounds absurd. And then if you had them go run a 15 miler at that pace, they couldn't even do it then. So it's like your 5K time trial won't actually feel even that much different than the ultimate goal race pace. So it's like, it just seems so crazy. But the way you do it is you get them running these 85%, long runs at like maybe it's a 16 miler. And then all of a sudden they're like, wow, that was actually conversational. And then they start to see how it like is going to lay out in front of them and say, oh, well, so like in 4 weeks, I'll be at 89%. And it's almost like in the looking back, that 4 weeks worth of training, 2 months worth of training, that you start to see like, oh, that's why I went 1% up. Because it sounds absurd when you see 88.5%. You're like, what? Like, really, guys? Like, are you just screwing with me? Like, you're going to make me calculate that? But then when you look back, you're like, oh, like it actually makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, I think it's almost the hindsight part. You got to get somebody through a certain length of the training, and then it all sort of starts to click. And then it takes away, you start to dissociate from how you feel. The feeling is like, no, I might feel like crap, but like I should be able to do this. And then you sort of rise to the occasion. You're like, oh yeah, I can do this. Like the 90% is like doable for 25 miles today.
And like you said, like it's gonna feel like the first time you ran 80%.
Yeah.
When you're running 90% later on in training.
And that feeling is like, you give an athlete that to where they're feeling 90% of race pace. It's like 30 seconds faster than what they started at, and it feels the same. And they're breathing the same. It's like you can't buy that. It's a good feeling. And that'll give you the confidence for racing too, Yeah.
So your philosophy and stuff applies even to what I would call non-elite athletes. You're talking about going from a 6:30 or 6:10 to 5:30. I'm like, I want to go from a 9 to an 8 on my kind of pace.
Yep, same thing.
Okay.
Because it's the physiological systems that your body is working in. If you're working aerobically, it's no different for you than it is for me. You just have to pay attention to whether or not you're above that threshold or below it. And your ability to get as close to that threshold as possible, and on the other end of things, bump up that threshold. We're all playing that same game, right? Like how fit can we get our bodies? How close can we get to the threshold? And the thing about the marathon that keeps us all coming back, I've probably run 3 or 4 marathons well. I've run 64 marathons. No, a lot of marathons. And yeah.
Made that one perfect shot.
I suck at marathons, what I'm saying. But it just feels too good it's like so easy to go over the threshold. And when you're tapered, like going into like above threshold doesn't really feel like you're above your threshold. It just feels good. And so you can run anaerobically for a good 20 miles, and it's just full system shutdown, which a lot of us know what that feels like. So, but yeah, it's the same thing. It doesn't matter what pace. And it makes it for us coaches, it's awesome, because it's like we get to speak to everybody in the same way. More questions?
We touched a lot on like the fast and stuff. Can you also talk about the importance of like regeneration runs, recovery runs, and why it's
probably
important
more
to be honest about like where your pace is?
It's where your body is able to adapt from those hard workouts and you're recovering. If you're running too fast on your regeneration runs, your body's not adapting to the hard work you've put in. So it's a balance between hard efforts and easy efforts.
Yeah, and that's
just as simple as that. It's just allowing your body to adapt the hard work you've put in.
This is the bane of an intermediate to advanced athlete's existence. I mean, so many athletes run too fast on their off days because you're just like pride, ego. Your buddies are running faster. I'm gonna run faster. It's like man. And I think I ran for years. I was like, if I didn't see between a 6:15 and a 6:30 pace on my watch, I was like, I suck. I'm done. I'm not gonna run. And now it's like I won't run faster than 6:50 to 7-minute pace, but my marathon time's like 30 minutes faster. It's like, it's hard. You hear it, like run slower to run faster. You hear it all the time. But the reason, and like what Omar said with regeneration, the purpose of the runs that aren't key workouts, which is the speed run and the long run, the purpose of them is for the body to regenerate and to have sort of an aerobic flush, right? So that the body's getting very aerobic and clearing out all of the, getting fresh blood to the working muscles, and that's the only goal. You're just regenerating the body. I think there's a range though of paces. So like if some people talk about junk miles. I don't believe there's such thing as junk miles. I think that every run has a purpose. I think that the super easy runs are necessary, especially when your body's so thrashed that you can barely even run. Like it's going to help you to get out and do something. So just go out for 30 minutes and just flush the body out. But then the next run or the next 2 runs, let's say you have 3 days between 2 key workouts. If you're doing double runs, that's 6 runs in that period of time. Maybe you're not doing doubles, you're doing 3 runs. Either way, you've got 3 days of running between 2 key workouts. On the third day, after you've done a fast workout, you can probably do more than just jog really easy. And in that case, like, you probably should. That's that time for like more of a 75 to 80%. And I think to touch on percentages, since we speak that language, what percentage should our easy and aerobic other runs be? They should be between 60 to 65%, which is going to feel like you're walking, up to about 75, 80%. If you're going above 80% of your goal marathon race pace in any of your days that aren't a key workout, you're blowing it. Like, you should never hit 80%. If you are, you're taking something away from your key workouts. So that 80% should be like a buzzer that goes off that's like, okay, I'm screwing something up for later on. But it should feel like, for a lot of athletes who run a lot and are running in the right paces, like when you give them those percentages, it'll sort of just match up. Like, oh yeah, that's what I run on my easy days anyway. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for coming out. If there's nothing else. Yeah. Thanks again, guys. Stay as long as you want. Yeah.